transportation of freight, similar groupings of people to understand how they use the waterfront, and what kind of barriers are in the way currently for them within that use, and what kind of improvements could happen to better enable people to operate their businesses or their use of the waterfront. Um, After that, that'll slowly segue into some economic discussion. We had Chris with the city last night provide a really great economic overview. I have her notes available that I'll go through for it, so I'll probably just read through those because they provide a really good grounding in the past 4 or 5 years of changes within Whittier finances or approaches to financial stability. And then, like Linda says, as we're going through this, if you would please put any questions into the chat, either open to the group or to direct it to Linda. When we get to the end of the economic aspect, we'll answer questions for folks and open it up for questions before Linda brings up the project webpage in order to give people to show people what's up there for documents and acting as a place for what we're doing. With that, for introducing, that's the introduction of the Corvus design team. We're also supported by a couple other firms. One is Northern Economics for economic assessments, and then P&D engineers related to waterfront planning and design. So I'll pass it briefly to Dave Ward with City of Whittier just to give an overview of the intent of this project, why we were hired for this, and a general introduction. So Dave, ask you to say hello.
Good evening. Thank you, Peter. A great turnout tonight. This is an exciting project for the city. I've been the harbor master for about just shy of 5 years now. And, we've got a lot of things going on in Whittier. And there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of players, as we quickly realize when we start putting our stakeholder meeting list together. We've done a ton of data collection to point so far, and we've got a lot more to do. And I think this is just a good point. This evening's meeting is a good time to just kind of set the groundwork for the future in-person meetings that we're going to be having next week on the 15th and 16th. There was some question last night about why we were doing a get together in Anchorage. And, we have a ton of users that work out of Eagle River and Wasilla and Anchorage areas. So I thought it was important to give them an opportunity to have a voice about what's going on in Whittier's ever-changing waterfront. So excited to have this project kicked off. Corvus has done a great job, and I look forward to just keep plowing ahead and getting more inputs so that we can get the highest and best use out of our very small footprint in Whittier's harbor area. Thank you.
And then also with us tonight from the city of Whittier, Scott, do you mind introducing yourself?
Good evening. Scott Corby. I'm the Director of Public Works. I've been here for 15 years, been part of the harbor waterfront development, float replacements, as well as predominantly all construction that has happened inside the city of Whittier for the last 15 years. So happy to be here and excited to hear what you guys have to say and contribute.
And lastly, Shelby, if you just want to say, introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Shelby Carlson. I'm the city clerk with the city of Whittier. So when you see things on social media or on the website, that is from me. So if you see mistakes, you know who to point the finger at.
And referencing that, even I was kind of confused between the numbers 7 and 8. The meeting was supposed to have been held last night, but when we recognized that there had been some confusion, it was pretty easy for us also to have it open, have a meeting this evening, in order to make sure similar and the same information was shared with people. So I think that's introductions. Linda, if you would bring up the exhibits. And while Linda's pulling those up, would really put in a plug again next week on the 15th, Wednesday in Anchorage from 4 to 6. The location is on the website. Linda will cover that toward the end of the meeting. It's basically an open house format for next week. The intent of that is to talk to people, have a chance to quiz you folks about how people use the waterfront, share some initial ideas about what might happen in the future. It really is an opportunity to talk to you as experts within certain areas for how you engage, use the waterfront, and how you might want to use the waterfront in the future that isn't possible right now. And then the day after, same time, 4 to 6 in the city building for meeting in Whittier with anybody that wants to come out in person. And if anybody has the ability to attend both, that's fantastic. In front of you is we should go back to page 1, I think. It opened up on. It's giving a sneak preview of the rest of the document. So here's an overall. The dashed line represents the boundary for the city of Whittier. The project that we are working on and is in the graphic below. The orange area is the waterfront development area that extends from the head of the bay down to Smitty's Cove. And then the harbor management area is the downtown small boat harbor area. Next page. Within the harbor management area, this is really the area that we've received a lot of information and comments from people on because it's the main place that people are interacting with currently. The important thing to note within this is the shaded areas. Currently, the orange area is ARRC, Alaska Railroad, leased to the city, and then the city leases that out to leaseholders. The yellow area that is shown in here is also railroad land. Both of these colors, the orange and the yellow, are currently under consideration for a land transfer between the railroad and the city of Whittier. There is not any shown on this exhibit, but in next ones there will be. Green indicates the land that is being transferred from the city of Whittier to the railroad in this land swap type activity. Underlying this whole project, because a significant amount of this trade deals with lands at the head of the bay, this is really the opportunity because the main limiting factor for Whittier, as you'll probably be quite aware of, is the lack of space. And within the harbor management area, probably the main thing that we heard from people is when the ferry is in, if there's some transport trucks going through, if there's any train activity, cruise ship is in, and then maybe it's Friday, a lot of people are bringing out boats to get into the sound. That area by the boat ramp becomes so congested with all of these different user groups using the same areas and moving through the same area. This lack of real estate to spread people apart means that for so much of your waterfront, there are multiple users trying to be in the same place at the same time to do what they would like to do. Beyond that, different comments we heard range from, bear management and garbage. Aesthetic dumpsters would be nice. And beyond the harbor-related ongoing repairs and improvements, the discussion of replacement of DeLong Dock. It's also how to develop this area for business benefit, bringing in visitors and having areas for business to operate effectively from. The next page, Linda, if you go to that. I'm not going to read through these, but this summarizes a little bit of the information that I just mentioned and more of that. One thing that we would note is in addition to the terrestrial, the upland area where there's a big limitation for available real estate, one of the constraints on the marine facilities, the harbor facilities, is that the bottom of the bathymetry, the bottom of the water drops off quite rapidly, not that far from shore. So there aren't really opportunities to extend the small boat harbor further out. Most development needs to happen parallel to the shore, and that's already pretty much happening within the areas that are feasible for that. And that's listed within that's one of the items listed within the constraints for this area and others. If you would go on, Linda. And in the chat, Linda's listed links to a couple documents. The inventory plan, which includes these exhibits, is available via those links for people to have a look at. Within the waterfront development area, moving out to a bigger expanse from the head of the bay out to Smitty's Cove. We have diagrams that we'll zoom into for Smitty's Cove and for the head of the bay. But this just calls out the different larger scale areas that are part of that. Next page, Linda. Smitty's Cove. This is another area that we received a lot of discussion on because this is really where the individual recreation, organized recreation, tour companies, charter companies, transport and freight, the DeLong dock. This is really a place where there are a lot of activities that are happening, where there is the possibility for user conflict because everything happens in such a constrained spot. Just want really to notate that hopefully when people can come out next week, if you are an expert, whether it's diving or a sea-doo activity out here, or sorry, jet ski, we really want to know how you operate in this space so that we can use that to look at options that try to separate these uses a little bit if possible, or if they do need to be co-located kind of the way they are now. Is there anything that can be done to improve how these different user groups coexist? Next. Again, these bullet points are in the document. These do come from the stakeholder group and then the public advisory group that we have. And really, again, I would reiterate the constraints within these areas are the lack of City of Whittier owned land. There's a lot of railroad owned land, even within the Smitty's Cove area. And then the offshore drop off that happens pretty quick. And we've heard from people that Smitty's Cove is a really valuable recreational asset, in addition to also serving commercial and marine activities. Next page. The head of the bay is really the exciting part of this because with a potential land trade, this gives the ability to perhaps take some of the pressure off the other area, the small boat harbor and the boat ramp down there. One possible opportunity here is to put in a single or double boat ramp and then significant trailer and vehicle parking in order to allow those people that are driving in to use Whittier or store their vehicles out of the water out here, and then they're trailering them in when they want to use them, to not have to do that in the small boat harbor area. So really for the weekend warriors or the people that are storing their boats not with moorage, removing that from the small boat harbor area would be of great benefit to decrease the amount of coexistence. The parking area that is across the tracks, we used some aerial photos and we took a bit of a guess at it. It looks like that area probably, could hold about 300 trucks and trailers. And about 50 parking spaces, plus or minus, probably plus. Out here, there is reasonable area to put in a boat ramps like that, with upwards of 200 parking spaces. So there is the possibility to really significantly reduce that independent boat trailer use of that area, which would be great. Beyond that, there's also the campground that's out here, which is expected to hopefully continue to operate. And then Huna Totem has their cruise ship terminal that they're finishing up in the orange area that's to the top of the diagram. The green land that's shown on this is the land that would be intended to trade from City of Whittier to the railroad. That does include the existing tank farm area and the other areas that you can see in the light green on this map. And an important part of the stakeholder meetings was to meet with other entities, DOT, the ferry system, and Forest Service, because they are a really valuable partner in the area. Currently, they are putting in that parking lot for trailhead access in the green area on the bottom of this map. And I think that when we spoke with them, it's going to be in the range of about 100 vehicles. So it's a pretty significantly sized parking lot out there. So a really important part of this is that we're having good dialogue with the railroad, Forest Service, and other entities to understand what they are planning on doing out here or what options might be developed that would benefit everyone. And I think I forgot to note earlier that the railroad is currently working on their own waterfront master planning. And I think that they'll have a draft document for that for public consumption in the near future. So that's something that we're looking forward to looking at to understand their desired use of the waterfront. Next page, Linda, please. Similarly, opportunities and challenges. The related to bathymetry or the bottom of water or the land below the water. There's similar constraints at the head of the bay. So any boat ramp that would be put in would require breakwater due to the weather that does drive up there. And then it wouldn't necessarily be able to develop outward into the area so much as along the shoreline. And even then, Army Corps of Engineers has already studied that area and came up with options. And their options had different levels of dredging from a breakwater in. So in order to develop small boat harbor facilities, there may be a fair amount of dredging that would be necessary in that area. Next slide. So slowly segueing into me playing the role of Chris, the Harbor Business District. The information that I have from Chris relates to Whittier economics. We'll just touch upon a couple of key things related to the waterfront. So within this graphic, the red hatching shows the commercial lease properties. These are the properties where the city of Whittier holds a master lease, and then they are leasing it out to the individual property owners. Each of the parcels has a lease agreement in place. And as a part of what we're doing, and Chris's notes touch on this a little bit more, it's trying to identify, to look at each of, not individual parcels, but as a collective. Each of them has a lease agreement that has an intent. Linda, if you go to the next page. Each of the intended leases has an intent. So for each of these entries within these tables, the intent is shown to the left, and then to the right of it, there's a general assessment of whether the current use is consistent with the lease application or not. We're not necessarily going to go through this, but it's just to note that some parcels are not consistent with their initial lease applications. Scroll down. And the main income that comes out of the waterfront facilities relates to moorage fees, and I have some tables to share with you for that. And then for the city of Whittier, the lease rates on the parcels, and then also things like head tax for, and I'll leave that to Chris's notes when I read them to you. Next page. Then the Harbor Triangle area, same thing. Next page. So if you scroll to the third page, I still got them in the wrong order. So for transient daily moorage, we looked at Northern Economics looked at Whittier, Seward, and Valdez in order to get some comparison between the three of them. Whittier currently, based on a 40-foot boat for transient moorage, has a rate of $48.80. Seward is $34.40, and Valdez is $32. So this illustrates that Whittier, relative to other ports, has higher transient daily moorage rate. And one of the discussions for this process, or that Whittier should have, is that Whittier has an amazing resource for the moorage that is so close to Anchorage, and whether that is valued or undervalued. That goes beyond just comparisons to other communities. The lengthy wait list that there is for moorage in Whittier is an indicator of how much in demand the product that Whittier has is. Then also for comparison for this is annual moorage. Annual moorage has a more competitive rate than daily transient. And I would note is the numbers for this for Cliffside are probably incorrect. This was based on looking at Cliffside's website, where for up to a 40-foot boat, it's $780 a month for summer rates. So what I show is multiplied by 12, but that's probably not correct. So that number needs to be updated. Then to the first page. So speaking of the leases, comparison to Valdez and Seward. Valdez leases properties within the waterfront areas based on 10% of the assessed value. So each year the rent is 10% of the assessed value of that parcel and improvements. Seward is based on 8%. And Whittier by code, I believe is 10%. But the reality is that the current lease income works out to an average of 4.5%. So there's some shortfall within that. The graph on the bottom of the page shows the distribution of the different percentage rates. So for example, the graph on the bottom shows that there are 3 parcels that are approximately 12%. There's 2 parcels that are approximately 2%. And then there's an outlier to the right where there's a parcel that's at 20%. So the 4.5% average is good to focus on because some of the parcels are higher than market rate, but most of them are below the market rate or the rate that is set by code. And then just in summary relating to income for the city of Whittier, the far right column is probably the most important. If all of the parcels were leased at the target of 10%, based on their current assessed value, there's foregone revenue of about $215,000. That basically summarizes that. And what I'm going to do is be a poor replacement for Chris. She provided me with notes, and she was really the star of the show for the meeting last night. So I'm just going to read through what she has in order to share it with you folks. So it's titled Waterfront Economic Development Plan, City of Whittier Current Financial Data and Future Changes. And I did check in with Chris. We're going to get this formatted. It is edited and ready for public consumption. And I think the intent of us sharing this again is that the past 4 or 5 years have seen some significant changes with Whittier. I think one of the prefaces to this that Chris had was that small towns, it's hard to keep staff for a long period of time. So you lose, when you have staff turnover, there are things that slip through the cracks, or you don't have the institutional knowledge. So there are a fair number of things that she will bring up within what I'm about to share with you folks. And I should breathe as well. I always kind of get a little bit ahead of myself. Perfect. So pretend I'm Chris. The Waterfront and Economic Development Plan contains some very interesting statistics and data around the city of Whittier's economic activity, with a retrospective look into the past. Recent public meetings have requested additional information about how the city currently manages its finances, how the city generates revenue and how much, how the city spends its revenues, and how we can expect recent major changes the city has implemented to impact the financial condition of the city and its infrastructure in the future. First, we'll discuss where the city revenue come from and how they are spent. And then we'll explain the tangible steps the city has taken in the past 2 or so years to place the city on a strong and sustainable financial path into the future. So the city's fund structure. The city maintains 5 primary funds for accounting purposes, allowing segregating of financial activities to ensure that each fund is financially stable on its own. Citywide revenues in total are approximately $6 million per year. The general fund. For most cities, the general fund is where they account for services paid for by taxes and which benefit the overall community, including public works, public safety, such as police, fire, and EMS, and administration, city council and clerk, city manager, parks and recreation. The general fund revenues average $3.5 million per year. The majority of general fund revenues come from 47% taxes and fees, 24% police contracts, and 21% leases. That totals up to 92%, I think, of the general fund. General fund revenues, in order from highest revenue to lowest, come from $833,000 in police service contracts for Girdwood and the tunnel, $760,000 in property tax, $650,000 in sales tax, $464,860 lease revenues, and until 2025, $405,000 in passenger transit business tax on charter and tour boat operations. The majority of general fund expenditures are for 49% police, fire, and EMS, 31% administration, such as council, clerk, city managers, and finance, and 18% for public works, road, sidewalk, storm drains, snow removal infrastructure, and building maintenance. The city has a total of 28 full-time employees, 20 in the general fund, 7 in the harbor, and 1 in water and sewer. General fund employees include 7 in the police department, 3 with fire and EMS, 3 with public works, and 7 in administration. The city has 3 separate business-like funds, which are called enterprise funds. They're operated separately, accounted for separately, to ensure that each is self-sustaining. Each should generate not only enough money to cover operating costs, but also to either pay for debt service on capital assets and infrastructure, or set aside depreciation funds to replace existing assets and infrastructure at the end of life. These would include harbor, the DeLong dock, water, and sewer. The harbor revenues are approximately $1.2 million per year. 80% of harbor revenue comes from moorage, 62%, $1,070,000, parking 9%, $155,000, leases 9%, $150,000, and launch fees 7%, $125,000. The harbor has 7 employees and 1.4 full-time equivalent seasonal summer help. In the past, the harbor has not generated any funding to replace capital assets and infrastructure, and relied on CPV funds to cover harbor debt service on harbor float and infrastructure replacement. That is no longer the case. Recent changes to the city's fee structure will enable the harbor to have a recurring source of revenue to replace a significant portion of capital assets and infrastructure. The new passenger fee goes 100% to the harbor, so that the operating costs of the harbor should be able to be sustained through typical rates, including moorage, parking, leases, and launch fees. Harbor staff also operates the DeLong Dock Enterprise Fund. This fund generates its own revenues separate from the harbor through offloading of seafood in the summer. Harbor funds are not used to subsidize operations of the DeLong Dock. Harbor staff costs are charged to the DeLong Dock when staff works in that area. The DeLong Dock is in serious need of replacement. The city is seeking grant funds for replacement of that dock as a multi-purpose freight dock, which will also continue to meet the needs of our seafood processors. The Water Sewer Fund generates approximately $415,000 per year in revenue. This fund has one full-time employee and shares staff from Public Works when needed. The Commercial Passenger Vessel Tax Fund is where the city accounts for cruise ship vessel tax, $5 per cruise ship passenger. This generates approximately $1 million per year to be specifically used to serve cruise ships and their passengers. The city uses these funds to provide added fire and EMS response services and equipment, trail improvements, and intends to replace public bathrooms on the waterfront, improve walking paths in the boardwalk, upgrade lighting, improve wayfinding signage, and similar. At the end of 2024, the city cash reserves for these major focus areas include $2.6 million within the general fund, $1.4 million for water and sewer, and $2.6 million for the harbor. Currently, city debt includes $6 million for harbor floats and improvement, of which $4.5 million will be started in 2025, an $820,000 sewer lift station project, which replaced the majority of the city's lift station infrastructure in 2024. This is still a fair amount, but it's pretty good information. The citywide total budgeted revenue is an average of approximately $6 million. This is just a table here that I don't think needs to be shared, but again, we'll be providing this as, or it'd be difficult to share. We'll be providing this as a hard copy. So moving to talking about the future. Over the past 3 years, the city has developed and implemented a plan to strengthen its financial condition, identify specific and sustainable revenue sources to replace harbor capital assets and infrastructure in the future, make the harbor fund financially self-sustaining, change the tax structure so to the extent possible, fee payers benefit from services and improvements, cleaning up the sales tax code, and eliminating the PTBT tax and replacing it with the new passenger fees. Water fees go 100% to the harbor. Ground fees go 100% to the general fund. Tangible steps have been taken to prioritize improvements to public services and infrastructure needing to address the growing number of visitors, and two, to set the city on strong future financial footing, including new fee structure spreads the cost burden as broadly as possible. A new 10-year capital improvement plan prioritizes capital infrastructure and asset replacement needs. Newly established budget policies drive fiscal sustainability. Identified areas, the areas have been identified for operational improvement. And implementation of a 2-year budget to allow time for long-range financial planning, better focus on enterprise fund rates, and time for a fairly small staff to address cleanup of things like lease inconsistencies, code enforcement and similar, and also amended lease code to standardize future leases. Ongoing work is to identify problems and close loopholes. Practices have been curbed that offered certain ratepayers advantages over others. For example, receiving multiple parking passes but paying for only one, or more favorable mortgage rates treatment. Amended the lease code to establish consistent terms for future leases. Amended sales tax code to eliminate unfair tax exemptions. And identified significant problems with existing leases. Inconsistent terms regarding fair market value rent, 8 versus 10 versus 12, fair market value assessments, inconsistent use relative to that authorized in the lease, lease terms such as 90 years that are inconsistent with the nominal use of property, lack of opportunity for city to review and amend lease terms that do not ensure the highest and best use of land for taxpayers, failure to properly record lease changes, failure to timely appraise properties, lack of political will to enforce contractual lease terms, and a CPI provision in some leases and not in others, and then some leases lacking escalation provisions, etc. And this is the last little bit. The city recognizes that persistent staffing turnover and lack of consistent leadership has led to inconsistent application of city code and regulations, errors in drafting lease terms, failure to enforce lease provisions and/or code requirements. We are systematically identifying problems and correcting them. This has not come without significant ongoing challenges and requires political will to resolve. These are some of the steps. Issued a request for proposals to obtain fair market value appraisals of land under the master lease with the railroad. The next step is to issue a request for proposals for fair market value appraisals of all lands leased by the city. Developing a land allocation plan to drive future land lease decisions. And in partnership with the Alaska Railroad, preparing to meet with legislators to seek authorization for a land purchase and/or exchange of current railroad lands in Whittier, enabling the city to determine its own destiny with regard to future economic development, residential housing, critical public infrastructure, etc. And that goes back to what I previously mentioned earlier about those shaded areas that were slated for potential land trade. And I think that is the thank you for staying tuned. It's kind of hard to read this kind of thing. And before we go into questions, so as Linda's getting prepped for that, if anybody does have any questions, please put them into the chat. This document has a lot of information in it. And I think the summary of what Chris said last night was there were a number of items within that noted that there have been past issues, mistakes, concerns that are being proactively resolved in order to increase levels of fairness and to ensure the city of Whittier is trying to maximize the income that they can bring from properties. And then with those funds, use them for the betterment of the people that are using those spaces, or leasing those spaces, or paying those fees. I think really about the fairness within it. And since I'm a poor substitute, I'm just the messenger. The meetings next week, Shelby, I'm uncertain. I'm assuming that for the Whittier meeting, Chris will be present. Is that correct?
I assume yes,
okay.
But I have not confirmed that either.
Okay.
I believe that she has accepted the meeting invite for potentially Anchorage, but
Perfect.
I would have to confirm that.
So segueing slowly into any answering of questions as we are able to with those of us that are present, would really encourage people, if you can, to attend either or the Anchorage or the Whittier meeting next week. Again, we're relying upon that expertise of talking directly with you folks to understand exactly what you think, what your concerns are, and what your ideas are. And we will be sharing inventory type exhibits and some initial summaries of what people are thinking about what goes where based on what we've heard from people. And then also, like I said, we're starting to do some of the math on this, that if we have 200 trailer and truck parking spaces that are needed at the head of the bay in order to remove one user group from the existing small boat harbor, we can show you how big that looks on a plan, roughly, that we can start to work on feasibility of things. So with that, Linda, before we head to website, are there any pending questions?
We don't have any right now, but I will just run through the website. I did drop a few links into the chat for anybody who is monitoring that. So I dropped in the project website link. I also dropped in, so the first public open house is in Anchorage at the Alaska Cowork space. I dropped in the address for that. That is, I did not include the date, but I can add that as well. But that is on January 15th, next Wednesday. And then January 16th, we are going to have a second public open house. It will be in Whittier at the Whittier Council Chambers. These open houses are from 4 to 6 p.m. And they're just, like we said, just an open house. You can come anytime between 4 and 6. I'm sure you can come a little bit after 6 if you wanted to, and we would probably still be there to chat. But just, coming, talking to us, you can come at 4:30, 5:30. It's very flexible. There's no presentation. It's just an open conversation I also dropped in the economic analysis and the inventory and assessment document that you can find on our website. So those are links directly to those documents. And then I will just share my screen again.
And while Linda's sharing, what I would say as well is for those of you that haven't been involved with the planning process before, what's critical we're at the beginning of this, but things are going to move pretty quickly. Part of what Linda will share is a project timeline, just to have a brief look at that. This is your chance at these meetings or via email is to share your ideas with us. It's a listening effort. The purpose of tonight was really just to try to give as a broad briefing. Sorry that you were drinking from a fire hose. Is there's a lot of information to get people thinking, because what's critical is to hear people's opinions and ideas. And something really to stress is that can certainly include constructive criticism. I love it when people have a concern, because by discussing and understanding their concern, it'll often make everything better. And our goal is always to, I personally hate the let's agree to disagree, unless you truly understand someone. So the goal for this is that when you're talking to us, you feel like you've been heard and understood, and participated in the process. And because the outcome for this is going to be ideally what's best for Whittier, the city of Whittier, the residents of Whittier. It's your plan. With that spiel for if and we have thick skins, you can always tell us things and we'll use it for good. Linda, back to you.
Great points, Peter. So I think everybody, let me know if you can see my screen.
We can see your screen.
Okay. So this is the City of Whittier website. Just under projects, you can go down to the Waterfront and Economic Development Plan. We have the project background, so just kind of a condensed version of what we discussed tonight. The timeline. So we are right now at the first public meeting, and then we are going to be just drafting, like we had talked about, just some preliminary ideas, some vision, goals, kind of looking at this inventory and analysis economic assessment that we have developed, that we were going to have at the public open houses. So those are both, like I said, January 15th in Anchorage, January 16th in Whittier. Once we get feedback on these preliminary ideas, the inventory and assessment, we are going to work on developing the draft waterfront and economic development plan. So that'll be continuation through February, from February through April. Once we get into April, we're going to be opening up the draft waterfront and economic development plan for public comment. So there will be a 45-day public comment period where the plan will be available to review. And we will also be having a third public meeting where we will be presenting the plan and providing an opportunity for people to ask questions. There will be an online place that you can submit your comments. So we won't be taking comments within that meeting, but we will be there to ask, if you want to ask questions, make comments, and we can be there to answer those. And then that will be in May. And the final waterfront and economic development plan, we are shooting for August. So having this all wrapped up and completed for August. You can also see some of the public meeting information. And then down at the bottom here, in the resources, so the two links that I placed in the chat for the economic analysis, you can also find here under the draft plan documents. Just click on that and it will take you to the PDF, and then the inventory and assessment document, which will also take you to the PDF. So that we reviewed the plans and everything that we reviewed tonight is just a more built out version of that. And then as we carry on, we will be updating this with more information. So I will stop sharing and I will review the chat, see if anybody's Any
And with the
questions?
with the economic asset or with the economic package that we have so far, a significant portion of it is looking backwards. And there have been discussion with the stakeholder groups or people about the data that's used within it. The main source of data for reports like this is census type data. And that starts to fail a little bit in smaller communities because it's really dependent upon that contact between people filling out their census forms or meeting with a census taker. So there's some of that when you look at it, it might not quite look right, but that's backward looking information, and that's logged because it's a useful part for applying for grants and recording a snapshot in time of that data. More importantly, it's really starting to look at the mortgage rates, the lease type things, where it's current information, or it was starting to forecast what decisions would be good for the purpose of Whittier. So when you do look at that plan, recognize that a fair amount of it's kind of dry census data.
And just the only question that came in, yes, the third public meeting will be in May, and the date will be is to be determined. So we don't have a set date for that yet, but we will be keeping everyone posted. You can come onto this website to see kind of updated information, timelines, and then through the City of Whittier Facebook channels and their marketing channels to see when, and we'll also be putting the we also have an email group. So if you want to join the email group, you can also drop your email in the chat or send it to me directly, and we can add you to that. And that you can just be kept up with updates on the project progress and the kind of meeting dates that we'll be developing.
And someone did just post that there's a symposium the 12th and the 13th in Whittier. If anyone does have any opportunities like that, a process like that is kind of nice sometimes, even if there's a table set up or someone might be able, not to hijack any part of a symposium, but if there's an appropriate place where there could be some contact. So that's the kind of thing to reach out to let us know if there are any places where we can kill a couple birds with one stone, or for people that are birders, maybe we don't kill anything with stones. Sorry. And then Dave, Shelby, and Scott, since we held the meeting last night and tonight, Chris had a little bit more flair for presenting her information, a little bit backstory on some of the things. Is there anything you think that between what I said or Chris might have said that last night that didn't quite get covered tonight that we should reinforce?
No, I think you did a great job. Well done.
And then, yeah. And so again, it's a very open process where the key thing is listening. You're all experts in your own way because you come to the meeting. You have the interest to be here. So we hope to see you again. And with even the people that support this and think, hey, it's great, they're doing a good job of this, please still weigh in and come out and support us, because the confirmations of information that people like is also great. So please do continue to participate.
I would add in closing that one of the user groups that we have not, or stakeholder groups really, that we haven't got a lot of feedback from is the kayak community. We've got a couple of individuals, but we don't have any commercial folks that have joined the chat. So if anybody out there has any influence with somebody, please reach out to them and ask them to get involved, because I don't want to get into a situation that says, oh, look, we got left out. So thank you.
And I'm personally looking forward in nerding out with anybody next Wednesday or Thursday when it comes to what does the ultimate put in look like for an individual or a couple of people going kayaking, or a boat trailer, a multiple kayak boat trailer type thing. A big part of this is understanding exactly how vehicles work, and what makes a great experience. So beyond just these bigger planning things, we want to understand your opinion on good design, that makes everyone's experience better.
And I
So
haven't
with
seen
that,
any additional questions come in, so I think if anybody wants to jump on and make any comments, please feel free, or we can kind of close things down at 7:30.
I will slowly say thank you for sharing your evening with us and participating in this. We hope to see you again. Dave, anything in closing you would like to say?
This is exciting. We're early on, and let's keep plugging forward. I appreciate everybody's input, and this is the chance to get your voice heard about all the ideas that you've had in the waterfront. So I'm looking forward to some really good meetings next week in person, and sketching some stuff out and getting some stuff on paper. So thank you, appreciate it, and thanks again for adjusting your schedules to put on a show today as well. So that's great. I appreciate the flexibility. Thank you.
Easy. Thank you all very much. Take care.
Thanks, Linda.
No problem. I will stop recording.